Hey everyone, I'm Arthur Cade, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Inspector Claim Talk with the preeminent home inspection attorney in the industry, the one and only Joe Denneler. Joe, welcome back. A new episode, and we've got a great topic today, man.
We certainly do. It's a popular topic, and it's always timely. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, that topic is the importance of inspection photos. So let's jump right into it. Why is it important for inspectors to take photos during an inspection, Joe?
For several reasons. We can kind of break it down depending on who the audience is. In terms of the client, right? Because that's the inspector's first duty. You know, in many occasions, the people buying this home, if you're doing the inspection for a buyer, have been in the house maybe once, twice. They don't really have the time to look around and orient themselves with where things are. And these people are also going to be the people who have to negotiate based on what's in the inspection report. And so the photographs are much better to show your client exactly what you're talking about or exactly where a defect is in the house. It's good practice to do that for your clients. It's also good for risk management purposes because, again, I say this often, but if you're doing enough inspections during the year, you're not going to remember one you did 4 or 5 months ago. And it's good to have that record in case your client has a question about the inspection. And then when we talk about how it relates to litigation or claims, for the same reason, it's important that you document how the house looked. And we're going to talk about that a little more in detail. But the written word is one thing, and it can convey a lot, but a photograph can really bring it all home. And that's why it's critical that inspectors use photographs and also take good photographs.
You'd mentioned the client, and that is my next question is, how are the inspection photos useful to the actual client?
Well, so for the reason I said, first and foremost, the client now has a record, a photographic record of what things are wrong and where they are. And so the client, in most cases, either through the agent or themselves, is now going to go and negotiate based on some of these things with the seller. And if the client has the photographs and can point out exactly where these things are, they can better instruct the contractors or any other people who have to come in and make the repairs. In addition, it's also helpful just to orient the client to where things are in the home. Forget about defects. Where is the water shut off? Where can they go to shut the electricity off in an emergency? Where is a critical part of the heating or air conditioning system that might need to be adjusted by the owner? So it's important to give the client a photographic record of what the home looks like on the date of the inspection and where all the important things are.
I would imagine, Joe, that an inspector takes a ton of pictures. Do they have to include all the pictures to the client?
Well, to answer the second part of your question, absolutely not. It's entirely up to the inspector's discretion when and how to use photographs. I can't think of off the top of my head one state-based standard of practice that might apply to an inspector where they're required to carry photos or take photos or provide photos. But realistically, though, how many is too much? I don't know. You never know, because that one photograph might be the thing that saves you in a claim or a piece of litigation. But I would say there's never enough. You don't have to give the client everything. You can sort through them. But you may want to use those photographs for other purposes later on.
Do the photos assist in showing the inspection client what a defect looks like and where it is on the inspected property?
Yeah, most definitely. And in terms of what it looks like, we have to keep in mind that the average American reads at a 7th, 8th grade reading level. And most people might buy a house once, maybe twice in their life. And so it's a rare occasion for them. And most people don't really know the difference between a soffit and trim, and why a crack in stucco might be important, as opposed to a crack in eaves, which is a much more serious condition. You don't know. And so it's important to not just give the client the words that they may or may not understand, but the picture is much better, because even if they don't know what the term is, they can see what you're talking about. I mean, I have inspectors too who also will, add detail to the photograph, like a big red arrow, whatever the case may be, because again, the ultimate purpose of the inspection is to communicate the observations of the inspector. And what better way to do that than with their own eye through a camera?
How many photos should an inspector take during an inspection? Is there a such thing as too much?
No, definitely not. I would say take as many as you possibly can. And, it's not just taking photographs of the bad stuff. Take photographs in every room, take photographs from every angle outside, anything you might be able to do, because ultimately any one of those pictures may be important to your client, and may be important to you later on in terms of a claim.
Well, that's my next question is, how do the inspection photos help in a claim situation?
The main factor with claim situations that we deal with is time, right? Because by the time something becomes a claim, well, the inspections 90% of the time long over by months or maybe years. And as I said earlier, if you're busy enough as an inspector, I mean, even if you're doing one a day, the chances of you recalling specific details about one you did 6 months ago or a year ago is relatively impossible, right? And so the pictures actually help you to refresh your recollection of what the place looked like at the time. And so when you think about it in terms of a claim, many times the claims relate to something that is now visible that may have not been visible at the time of the inspection. So if you're doing an occupied or a staged property, well, the seller's belongings are everywhere in the home, and the inspector can't move them, but the inspector can record how the room was laid out. And that may be critical because, for example, you might have a claim 3 years later and they say, well, there was a stain on this wall that you failed to inspect when you did our inspection 3 years ago. Well, good luck trying to remember that. But if you have pictures of how the room was staged, you might have a photo that shows the dresser up against that wall hiding that very stain. And that's not a detail anybody's going to remember. It's not a photograph that needs to be in the report, but you've now documented for perpetuity, really, the ability to go back and say where things were in the home and why you may not have been able to see certain conditions that are now the subject of a claim.
I mean, this is all great in theory, but if you actually had claims or cases where an inspection photo saved the day for the inspector?
Oh yeah, more times than not, that's for sure. I've had many situations like I just described where the inspector has just a simple picture of how the room was laid out, and it clearly shows that there was no way they could have told or seen, what was hidden behind that furniture or those belongings. I had one come in literally yesterday, where the allegation is that in a bay window that there's rot and that the caulk is all deteriorated and this whole window needs to come out. And it's a $5,000 or $6,000 project. But my inspector has great photographs. And 2 of the photographs he took were of that very same bay window at almost exactly the same angle. And the caulk is completely intact around the whole thing. There's no evidence of damage. And so that claim is going to go away because there's no way they can prove that the inspector should have seen a defect when I have a photograph from that day showing that it wasn't visible. So that's huge. And I think that more often than not, I'm thinking about the claims where we literally have to send maybe one letter and get rid of it. And in most cases, those involve a photograph that really just completely ends the claim. And sometimes people, they bring these claims to a lawyer and they want to come after a home inspector, and the lawyer doesn't really have all of the evidence yet because they just got involved. And then they get these pictures and they say, well, wait a minute, this case isn't that good. And maybe they counsel their client that, this case isn't a winner and here's why, and here's why the inspector couldn't see it. And so it may save even the claimant thousands of dollars and hours, pursuing a claim that doesn't really exist.
We've obviously talked extensively about photography, but we're also living in a video world. Does it make sense to film parts of We've obviously talked extensively about photography, but we're also living in a video world. Does it make sense to film parts of the inspection? Is that actually helpful at all?
Well, it's more prevalent now than you might think. There's a couple things going on. There's a huge upswing in the tech, right? And so we have inspectors now that have cameras on a 360-degree rotation, and they just put it in the middle of the room and let it roll, and they may be doing other things, but they're getting the full 360 view of what the conditions are in that home, and they're providing them. Drone video is very popular right now, and as that tech gets better, now I have a home inspection report comes in and it's got a video embedded with the drone flying over and showing all the conditions of the roof and areas where the inspector probably couldn't get to with a ladder. So all those things are critical and they can all help. But I can give you an example even before that. I had an inspector who wore a body cam, relatively cheap piece of equipment, like $200 at Best Buy, and did an inspection. And then about 8 months later, he got a letter from a homeowner's insurance carrier for the person who bought the house, claiming that he failed to report that there was home heating fuel spilled and the feed line from the oil tank to the furnace was cracked, and it was a major environmental issue. And so he calls me, and this is back when I was actually litigating. I wasn't the insurance attorney. And he says, I got this letter. And I say, well, do you have any pictures or anything? Because most inspectors at that time, especially, weren't taking pictures of these conditions that were just there. He says, no, Joe, I don't have pictures, but I have the video. And I said, well, send it over. Let me take a look. And lo and behold, he's got the basement floor. The feed line is in pristine condition. It's a copper feed line. You can see clearly, and there's no evidence of any staining or spills anywhere. And I sent that video off to the insurance company adjuster who was pursuing that claim for the carrier, and that was the end of that claim. Now, there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with video that can cause problems. For example, you may accidentally catch the people who live there in the video and have to get a release from them to use it. It may add some time, but still pictures can do almost as good of a job if you're careful and if you take the time you need to shoot pictures of every room in the house and multiple angles in the house. You can do the same thing with stills. That example, though, was, again, very powerful evidence for me to present to an insurance company against a claim.
So what do you say to inspectors who don't want to take time to actually photograph the entire home?
I'm going to say, you know what, you need to make time. And because the insulation it gives you from a claim and the help it gives to your client to understand their home that they just bought, I think far and away supersedes the additional time. And it really doesn't take long. We have iPhones, we have digital cameras. There's inspectors doing the inspections with their iPad in hand that they can just snap pictures. You're not submitting these in a photography contest. These are business photographs for you. And so I think you have to look at it as part and parcel of the entire inspection process.
I guess my final question is, once they've taken the photos, how long do they actually have to keep them?
Well, it depends. Some states that are regulated have requirements that you hold on to your inspection report and the signed inspection agreement for a period of time, sometimes up to 4 or 5 years. But, we can store a lot of things digitally now that we couldn't before in much smaller pieces of equipment, a flash drive or an external hard drive or in the cloud. And I'm going to say, I've had claims come back that were inspections from 10 years ago. All right. And I've had those situations come up and my inspector had photographs, and boy, if we didn't have them, we'd be in trouble. So I'm going to say keep them as long as you possibly can. It really doesn't cost that much to do. If you're going to be really oriented about the purging of your records, I would say at least keep them for 7 years.
I can't imagine that a home inspector is not going to watch this video and not take photos. So I think you've probably done a really good job in changing, hopefully, a home inspector's life in case they ever encounter a crazy situation like some of the ones you've described.
Thanks. Yeah, I do hope that people take this to heart, that if I can convey one thing to you in this series of films, this is one of the critical ones.
Thanks so much, Joe. This has been another episode of Inspector Claim Talk. Always great information, and we'll see you on the next one, Joe.
Thank you.